Yeah, I'm Maitrinandi.
And I'm Priyavadita. When did you first come along?
I first came along to the NBC in the December of '91.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That was at Wilbraham Road.
Yeah. I first pitched up March, April 1990. I was just off to Gookie Local when you first came along. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I first came along to the centre at Wilbraham Road, it was in a fairly big semi-detached house. And the Buddhist centre was downstairs, a men's community upstairs, but the two felt very connected. It didn't feel as if it was something completely different, and the men were up and downstairs. And because it was quite small, everyone knew everyone. So if there was something on, then if someone was missing, you would notice, and you'd say, I wonder why they're not here. And that feels very different here. You know, if you were missing there, you were definitely missed.
Yeah.
And for that reason, it felt like much more like something that you could belong to and that we owned. So yeah, I think that's one of the big differences for me.
Yeah. I mean, well, sort of similarly on that theme. It was interesting. Almost immediately as we opened this place up, it would recognise like, oh, it's a public building. It's needs a lot of running, and people naturally assume it's centrally funded, and it was looking pretty swanky at that point, wasn't it? And, it was just sort of complete, freshly decorated and whatever. And so it was hard. It was hard initially, anyway, to get people to realise that if you don't help out, this place doesn't run. And you don't support. So yeah, that was because I've noticed like a few years ago I went across to the Blackburn Centre, which is much smaller. And again, it was interesting being reminded of, this is what a small Buddhist centre feels like. It's quite different.
So how did I feel about moving here? Well, not very pleased really. I think it was probably different for Priyavadita because he'd been involved in looking for a building. Yeah, it was his fault. But when we were told in a Sangha night that the centre had been sold and we were moving out, I was devastated. I was quite shocked actually, and I think more so because we weren't just moving to another centre. There was going to be a longish period when we were meeting in a hired hall, and then in a building site. And most of the Sangha nights in the building site were building nights. So they would be refuges and precepts and transference of merit, but between those two things, we were building. So I was really upset that we moved, but soon became really enthusiastic and inspired by the project.
For you, Priyavadita?
Yeah, well, how it came about was I was ordained by that point. I'd been working for the Buddhist Centre for almost 2 years, I think. I can't quite remember the chronology now. And I was on the council of the local charity. It was the FWBO in Manchester then, Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. And we had a kind of, I don't know what you call it, a vision meeting, and we were discussing whether our centre was still fit for purpose, and it was actually getting a bit too small at that point. So we had the community, we had relatively busy centre. There was a couple of businesses. What was Kalyana Prabhu doing? It was a magazine or something.
Darkney.
Yeah, Darkney. So that was in the basement along with Clear Vision. There was a central office down there, and we just felt, we had a meeting. We felt we needed more space, so we decided, all right, well, the following week we all went down and had a look around the Northern Quarter because Mokshpriya had heard about potential buildings. On that first wander around, we saw this place and thought, okay, that's huge. And it was in a right state. So it's funny how we were on Tib Street that afternoon, and this guy walked past, a fairly scruffy looking guy with a dog, and turned out he was an architect with a practice on Tib Street, and he was looking for charities that were interested in moving into the area and would be prepared to take on one of these buildings, as he figured there was some funding available from the city council, because they wanted to showcase what could happen with these buildings. Because at that time, there were a lot of fabric dealers, clothes dealers, things like that, and they were moving out, relocating up towards Cheetham Hill, so a lot of the buildings were empty. So yeah, he helped us look at various places and then put our place on the market and bought this one.
So I can remember the first time we had a Sangha evening here, and we came to the place and everyone was stood outside and Moksha Priya went, "So this is it," and I was like, "What have you done?"
Yep.
It's madness. We came in and it was just, a lot of the rooms were still broken down into small rooms. Everything was painted bright green. It was dirty and
a lot of rot.
Well, I didn't see that on first visit, but I couldn't see any way we could make anything of it. At that time I was living in Preston.
Yeah, you
working as a full-time ward sister on a coronary care unit, and thinking, am I going to traipse back and forward to do this? I don't think so. But within weeks, I was just, it grabbed me. Yeah, when we first got here, so there was somebody handing out jobs. So often Priyavadita actually. And so we just did what we were told to do. So for most of us, well, for a lot of us, and definitely for most of the women, for a long time we spent a lot of time stripping these windows that were painted with what felt like 10 layers of bright green paint, and it all had to come off without cracking any glass.
Because we had no money.
So we had to borrow heat guns and scrapers, and we just scraped windows for a long time. For a long time. Well, and then we moved on to the windows outside. I
was going to say, any of the jobs that we did in this place went on for a long time, because it's like Moksha Priya thought, a couple of weeks to strip out, 4 months. You know,
one job that really sticks in my mind is at this floor.
Oh God, yeah.
Which was reclaimed from a school, and then when it got here, it was in here. It was an enormous pile of wood, and it's not this floor, is it? But the original one.
Yeah.
We had to take all the nails out of it and then scrape all the
grooves. Yeah.
Scrape all the grooves.
Yeah, so and
that just went off. For a long time.
A very long time.
So many of us were coming here on days off, and I was coming here on my days off from work and in the evenings, and it was just really inspiring that we were all doing something together, and we're going to create something that none of us individually could have even dreamt of. And I think we were just taken, we accepted Moksha Priya and Priyavadita's vision and what they could create, and hoped they were right, and trusted them.
It was more Moksha Priya's vision than mine. I mean, I tended to do I was the kind of fixer for it all, wasn't I? I was organising the teams, organising the work. Moksha Priya would say, copper door. And it's like 70 phone calls later, I'd worked out how you create a copper door without it going straight through the floor. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, my role was more like that.
Yeah. So what was your role then?
Gaffer,
yeah. I tended to spend my days on the phone, running up and down the building, people going, Priyavadita! And go and look at something and go, oh yeah, do this, oh I'll get that tool, oh I'll have to go off and buy some materials. We had no idea what we were doing, what we'd taken on, and you talk about your experience of the first time you saw the building. I clearly remember the day we got the keys and I walked into the building and I looked at the ground floor and I thought, oh my God, what have we done? We'd sold our old centre, we had 40 grand. And I'm thinking, 40 grand isn't going to touch the sides in this place. But weirdly enough, a lot of things happened, like people got inspired. There was a guy who had a business who was coming along to the centre, he just gave us loads of tools and paid for loads of skips early on, and people gave us money, the council gave us money to do, they were able to fund bits that weren't strictly to do with the religious part of the building, but like the outside, or preserve, because it's not a listed building, but it's an area of special interest because of the type of building. So they were able to fund parts of that. We got some money from the English Heritage Trust, or what they're called, Foundation.
Yeah.
Well, the conditions on it were a bit of a pain, frankly. So and then towards the end, we were getting, spontaneous donations from people, quite large sums of money, because we did need a lot of money to get through. The scale was part of it.
I think the scale,
the biggest challenge is
the length of, I think the biggest challenge was how long it went on for. Because I think all of us got, it's really easy to be enthusiastic for 3 months, for 6 months, for a year.
21 months?
2 years. It gets, the scale of it was difficult. And it was hard work. It wasn't somebody, you couldn't come along and say, I'm not feeling really well today. You had to be really fit. There was, we had one of the memories I have is that we had a tool room where all the tools were in there, obviously. And periodically, it seemed like often actually, we had to move it because we wanted to do something in that area where it was. So we'd all arrive downstairs and Priyavadita would say, right, today we've got to move the tool room from the attic onto the first floor. So there was just this constant stream of people going up one set of stairs, down the other, up one set of stairs, carrying tools, drop them off, go and get another, bring it down, go and get another. And that might go on all day.
Yeah, well, the plasterboard deliveries, about 200 sheets of plasterboards, and then we'd spend the entire day feeding them up the gaps in the staircase to get them to the top or something like that. Or, I did the sandblasting, didn't I? With Eddie, and then communicated with Bjorn as he was then.
Yeah.
Which again, that's a fairly typical example of what it was like. No idea what sandblasting is. We've got to sandblast all the walls and all the timber. Okay. Load of phone calls, buy a sandblasting pot, hire a compressor, whack in great big thing, buy loads of sand, and then me and Eddie and then me and Communicator just spent the nights sandblasting. Then you lot would turn up and shovel up all the sand and throw it in the skip, and then we'd start again the following night. That just went on for a month. By the end of it, we were pretty good at sandblasting.
I was pretty good at shoveling up sand as well.
you were ace.
Another thing that I remember is that very early on in the project, we realised we needed to replace the electrics and the central heating, and both those jobs for the whole building were done by Mitras, and led by the Reader's Digest book. So Guna Ketu had the Reader's Digest book of plumbing, and Sue Ketu had the Reader's Digest. Nyana Ketu, sorry. Nyana Kumara. Nyana Kumara had the Reader's Digest book of electrics, and that's what they did.
This is why I always get a bit twitchy about the electrics on the fourth floor when I started, but it still works. And we were buying like old boilers, really old boilers off. Again, we're buying lots of stuff from reclaim yards, and then somehow to get them working. And they did for a few years, didn't they?
Yeah.
That's how we had to piece it together. All the radiators came from Monsell Hospital, which was being demolished at the time, the old HIV and infectious diseases unit. The doors, a lot of the fire doors came from there. Most of them are still here.
And the floor came from a school.
It was Lim High School, We went and lifted that, put it all in a van, brought it here, moved it about 30 times around the building, did all the scraping down we were talking about, and it finally got laid towards the end of the project. It was mad.
That's mad.
It was mad, but kind of interesting. I was also the treasurer at the time, so I was like, and I'm not great with money, and I was really anxious about how much we needed. And
so money was a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically every 2 or 3 months we'd have a council meeting where I'd go, right, so we've got about £5,000 left. I think we probably need about another 60 to get through. I don't know where the money's coming from. I was like, it's not your problem, Priyavadita. Okay, and then we'd get through, and then another month or two later, like, we spent that 60. We need another. Moksha Priya just had this sense that if it's worth it, the money will turn up. And actually, in the end, he was right.
Yeah.
I kind of hated him for it, but very stressful.
Yeah.
The men and the women.
at the
Well,
time.
yeah.
You know,
different days, wasn't
It was a different ball game for men and for women, of course. There was a men's building team headed by Priyavadita, and they met in the morning to do refugees and precepts. And for the women, it was a bit more ad hoc. There would often be only one or two women here, often only one. Not necessarily,
often only you.
often only me, but not only. There were other women
there
who
were
came
others,
along when they could. A lot of the other women had jobs or children or other commitments. So it was more difficult, I think, for the women. The men on the project were extremely welcoming and glad that we were here because we just needed pairs of hands. But it was different. As things went on, we did join in with the transference of merit in the evening when we were finishing, but not to begin with, and we never did the refugees and precepts in the morning together. So that was hard, I think.
When I think back on that, it's like, oh dear.
It was harder, and often we'd all be here at 9 o'clock, and then the men would all disappear, and I'd be left scraping a window, thinking, oh, what?
Yeah, well,
Anyway,
you're idealistic, and
we
blah, blah, blah.
learned.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we learned, and things are different. I hope. But even with that, I just loved it. I loved it. In fact, to the point that about 6 months before the end of the project, I left my gave up my job to come and join the building project full time. And I think I did that for about 6 months. Part way through that, I joined the centre team, but I was seconded probably 4 days out of 5. So the Priyavadita would come into the centre office and go, "Have you got your dirty clothes with you? Come on, we need
Did you bring your car keys? Someone needs to go to IKEA in Birmingham."
Yeah. So although I was on the centre team and I supposedly had a job, I didn't spend much time in the office. What did we learn from it? I think we learned a lot about teamwork and about trusting each other. And about friendship, actually.
Yeah.
You know, some of the times when you were doing jobs, it were just horrible. You were dirty, it was cold, because there were no windows in the building for most of the time, so it was freezing in here. And we just got each other through it. So I think friendship was a big part of it. And when we were on the scaffolding outside, you needed to trust each other on the scaffolding on the 3rd floor. So I think trust, friendship, cooperation.
A lot of going beyond yourself, wasn't there? But we were all kind of really on fire with that all the way through it, which, you know, it had a very positive effect on most people involved in it, I think. I always remember people like Nandana, you know, before she was in her, she would have been in her 80s, you know, like catching her in here on this step ladder right up the top with a crowbar levering stuff off the beams, like, Nandana, I was thinking, great, she falls off that, she'll be dead.
On the scaffolding outside?
Yeah, and on the scaffolding outside, yeah. But
I remember her on the scaffolding. I don't know what floor she was on, but I do remember our project saying to her, "You need to go in."
But you know, I suppose what I'm kind of getting at is the Buddhist centre was a very different Buddhist centre for quite a long period of time. But actually, it worked in a lot of ways for a lot of people, and it was a smaller, more intense situation. But you know, those who either didn't want to or simply couldn't really get involved, they pitched. You know, a lot of them pitched up again towards the end, didn't they? Yeah. And you know, with the massive cleanups and things like that, and then you know, then they had this Buddhist centre that then operated more like something that's recognised for a Buddhist centre. But yeah, it's kind of, for me, that was one of the big lessons. It's like, we think the Buddhist centre is a building, it's not. You know, it's more about what happens. And it might be a building project, or it might be all sorts of things. It's, you can't pin it down in that way. And
I think that people felt that during the time, because there was a period of time when this room was kind of done, half done. Yeah. The shrine wasn't here, but there was, you know, a rudimentary shrine, and the floor was kind of safe. And we led people through from the front door to bike, walking along planks.
God, yeah.
To Guinness classes.
That's mad.
And they loved it. People didn't come once and go, "Oh, I'm not going back there again, it's a building site." They came again and again. And I think the friendship and the Sangha just was inspiring to other people. To see it was inspiring.
I mean, I was going to say, another facet that I learned was like, you know, there was a lot of personal difficulties on the council. which, you know, in the end, thinking back on it, it's like, well, what do you expect? You know, yeah, you're Buddhist and you're trying to be dead friendly and da-da-da-da, but you put people under enormous pressure and all the fracture lines become really obvious, and, you know, it took a couple of decades to sort out some of it, but that was, you know, you can think, oh, that was a failure, but I'm not sure it was actually. It was just like, that's part of how you mature, isn't it? You know, it's not all friendly and nice. Some of it, you know, when you think about it, the trustees were they were personally liable for what was going on, and then Moxbury go, oh, we're going to do this, and it's like, and I'm thinking, right, so that means we'll probably owe about another 40 grand each. We haven't got any money. Of course, people found that really difficult, you know, and of course we're, you know, from our side, you know, from the building project side, we felt like pressure to get decisions made quickly because every delay costs money. So you can imagine the sort of the difficulties it caused, you know. So yeah, I think within the teams working, the building teams, there were a lot of trust and friendship. Within the council, it was more like a bit of a bomb went off, really, in some ways. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't want to say it was just like that, but it did, you know, caused all those sort of issues to come right out to the fore, which is again part of, you know, the transformation process. Sometimes isn't very pretty. You know.
But the foot soldiers were entirely unaware of all that.
Well, it's funny because, you know, after this building project, we had a little building business for a while, which for me was like, oh my god, it was such a difficult time. We took on a really difficult job. I had many of the guys who'd been part of the team in that, and a number of years after that project ended, I happened to be on an order weekend. I hadn't been on any for a long time, and all of them were there, and I got them together and I said, look, I'm really sorry if I gave you a hard time in Birmingham when we were working. And they all said, we had a great time. You know, you really looked after us. Like, we could tell you weren't having much fun. I was like, oh, okay. So I suppose that was part of my job doing it. On that level, it works, you know.
And I think one of the important things was that we didn't lose sight of the fact that what this building was going to be. It was a building site. It was hard work. It was cold, and we were tired, but we knew it was going to be somewhere that we would love in the future, and that we had loved in the past. And it wasn't just going to be a building. It was going to be our Buddhist centre. And I think out of that, almost all the full-time building team were ordained. A couple of years later, I was as well. It was more than a building site, although sometimes it did feel like that. But mostly, it was a place that we grew to love. And it was bigger than just a building project. I think it's important that people understand that it's our building. It's not something that's been just dropped here by the council or something. We've created it. It's our place. It's our home in a way, and for that reason, it's important to both look after it and to kind of care for it and to use it, because, you know, in a way, the Buddha lives here in the middle of Manchester, and we've got to care for that.
Yeah, I'd say I think it's also a lesson in a Buddhist centre isn't necessarily this building or a building. It's a much more intangible thing than that. It's, you know, in a funny way, it's like it's a bodhisattva within which beings come across something of great meaning. And yeah, I had a very powerful sense of that during the building project. So it's, you know, I find that harder to do in a more established Buddhist centre. And also, you know, like this sort of isn't my kind of place. I don't really come very much. I'm still around, I'm still involved, but I was involved in establishing the conditions within which an awful lot of people have made contact with the Dharma. I don't sort of mean that in a kind of sense of personal aggrandisement, but it's just like, oh, I had something to do with that, didn't I? You know, there's loads of order members around Manchester now, many of whom have, you know, come to join the order through their involvement with this particular building, you know.
Yeah, I think I still love this building, and I keep hearing discussions about you might sell it and stuff, and I think, oh no, for two reasons really. One is that I think we created something here that has given so many people opportunities that they wouldn't have had. People who wouldn't have gone to Chorlton or to Levenshulme. This place, has been so valuable to so many people. And when we first started, this area was a wilderness. There weren't even street lights down here when we first came along. So that's one reason. And another reason, which is entirely personal, is that towards the end of the building project, my dog was knocked over, and I had him cremated, and his ashes are mixed into the mortar in a wall downstairs. So my dog's here, and for that reason I'll always love it.
A lot of people's malas are here, and little Buddha figure, they're all in the walls. Yeah. It's like that was very much part of what we did during all the way through the project. We were kind of imprinting the building and the area with the Dharma somehow or other, at least in a ritual way.
I do remember the Sangha Retreat came to open the centre on a Saturday, and then we had a day off on the Sunday, and we all had a day off. And on the Monday morning, we came in, and Priya and I were stood downstairs, and Priya went, well, we've got it. What shall we do with it?
How do we run it?
Oh yeah.
How the hell do we cover reception? It's mad.
We hadn't even thought beyond finishing up on the night before Sangha Retreat was coming, we were varnishing the floor downstairs. We hadn't even thought beyond that.